Welcome to Alt-Centrism Central. As always, I'm your host, or one of your hosts, Boomer Ted Cruz, and I'm again joined by Joe,
Yep, that's me. I am the other one.
and and we have a special guest today, and his name is Skylar. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Uh, sure. So my name's Skylar. I work in EMS. I am an emergency medical technician by trade. I'm currently cross-training as a dispatcher, just in time to get off of the road for the coronavirus, luckily. Um, yeah, I work in a medium-sized city and have lots of experience doing it. Not an expert at all in corona or any type of virus for that matter, or anything really. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem, no problem. I think
Excellent.
regardless, I think anybody in the medical field has a worthy opinion to give on this, as there's multiple aspects that we have to think about.
Mm-hmm. And that kind of like leads right into the topic. The topic, by the way, if you haven't figured it out, is the coronavirus. It's been the topic on everybody's minds for the past few days. So I guess let's just get everybody's general thoughts out of the way first before we get into more specifics.
No, I don't have anything.
Really, Peyton, you have no thoughts about it. Not even
Well, okay,
when you're gonna
okay,
get your stuff
okay.
from your dorm.
I I have thoughts about it. I mean, my college has canceled on classes, in-person classes, that is, for the rest of the semester. We're online only, which is somewhat well, it's very frustrating. Not so much because I'm still worried about not having in-person with my classes, because none of the classes I've taken this semester are the particularly interesting ones. They're mostly core requirements. But mostly because of the fact of how much stuff I do on campus, whether it be attending economics events, doing clubs. I don't really get to do that, and nobody really gets to do anything like that, because we're seeing more and more a descent into over the virus, a descent into this crackdown, this authoritarian crackdown by the government. I mean, I do not think the response has been proportional at all to the severity of the virus at all.
Okay, well, I mean that's fair. In terms of the clubs, though, it's a good opportunity to make them all digital. We could have everybody flock to our platform. That would be awesome.
Oh yeah,
People wanted to do
sure.
that. I mean,
The
we're all
the,
cooped
the
up inside
problem
anyway.
is, oh yeah, the problem with that though is there's something lost in the online interactions. I mean, I not somebody who disses online and is one of those like boomers who's like, you can't have the same interaction online as you can in person or some shit like that. But
Hmm.
definitely there is something to in-person interaction for a lot of things,
Yeah, yeah.
for a lot of relationships,
Well,
especially relationships that were built on in-person interaction.
that's fair. Yeah.
And we're getting closer and closer. Using New York as an example, I mean, it's gatherings over 50 people have been banned completely. You're not supposed to have them at all. And then now the president just come out and said, if you have interactions with people, it should be limited to 10 people at most.
Hmm.
Um, you know, this is going to really um, kill an economy like ours that is mainly based off of service. Now, something I want to clarify is that this economic downturn is not because of Corona. Corona is like the straw on the camel's back that broke it.
Yep. Yep.
But definitely this is going to cause a lot of problems, because I mean, an economy that is mainly based off of production and manufacturing is probably not going to be hit as hard as we are going to be hit by all this isolation.
Hmm. Skylar, what about you? What are your general thoughts about what's going on?
About the coronavirus, just in general.
Yeah, just in general.
Well, I think that, and so far in my experience, it seems like people are kind of taking a doomsday approach to how they want to anticipate the coming months, right?
Yep.
So you go into a grocery store. Actually, we were just in a grocery store today, and half the aisles were empty, and everybody was kind of
Yep.
like a little
Yep.
bit more aggressive, trying to get their shit, whatever. You know, they put limitations on how many cartons of eggs you can get, or how many
Mm-hmm.
cartons of milk, or how many, if you can find them, like chicken breast containers you can get, and
Yep.
you know, so the people are kind of
So
seem like they're anticipating the worst, which is
right, yeah. So you're highlighting the issue of the way that the general populace, the people, are responding to the virus. What do you think about what Peyton said? What do you think about specifically about the government? Do you think that they're overreaching a little bit, or do you think that they're in the right?
I think that they're, well, okay. So the thing with the government is they're being advised by the CDC, right? And
Mm-hmm.
CDC is watching coronavirus in November. So the CDC, the thing is, nobody has a very well formed opinion on the nature of coronavirus. We have things to compare it to, like SARS or MERS, because it's related, but the actual devastation that can be caused by COVID-19 isn't really very well understood. It's not very well researched yet because it's just kind of like coming all at once. So
Mm-hmm.
the CDC is just kind of setting guidelines as to what they think is the best way to approach it to try and mitigate the damage that it can do. And so they're just saying, well, all we know about it is it's extremely contagious, and this would be the best way to keep it from infecting everybody too quick to, combat. And so the government's kind of taking that proclamation and running with it, doing what they can with it. And it's kind of trickling down into local governments, the state level and the county
Yep.
level.
Yep.
And I don't know, they're doing the best with what they know. I don't know if it's like some type of authoritarian grab ass game, or if it's they're genuinely trying to not kill an eighth of the population. It's kind of
So
tricky.
what you're saying is you're not sure about their intentions, but what you're seeing is that they're trying to go by what the CDC recommends, but they're also just running with whatever they think would be good based on those guidelines.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, it was for a while. Like, to my understanding, like I said, I'm not very well read in it, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't like keep up with the news or whatever. But it seemed like for a while they were trying to play it off as not a big deal. First of all, it was like, oh, it's not in the United States. It's abroad. It's in China.
Yep.
It's in Italy. It's in Korea. It's not here. And then we got a case here. And we're like, oh, well, it's not that big of a deal. It's one person. And then it was 3 people. And they're like, oh, that's not that big of a deal. It's nothing. Don't worry about it. And then all of a sudden, it's like every state has confirmed cases.
Right.
The city that I live in, people have already died from it. People that I work with have already been exposed to it. And so now
Mm-hmm.
it's like, oh, well, shit, I guess we should have listened to begin with. And now they're kind of going with the CDC.
Okay. Peyton,
I don't know if that answers your question, but
no, that does. That's a great answer. I like to set up. I like to get a general feel for where people are on things, so that we can understand where they're coming from when we discuss these things. So I think you did a great job explaining where you're coming from on some of this. Peyton, could you make the case a little bit more um, for why the government's response to this is perhaps more than it should be, or even authoritarian in nature?
Well, I would say that because largely it's unnecessary. I mean, it's not unnecessary because there isn't a threat from coronavirus. I'm not saying that, but why it's unnecessary is because the measures they ended up placing were already being done, just not to the extent that they were doing. So schools, private schools especially, uh, restaurants, private institutions, we're already canceling events like crazy. As somebody who is very involved and looks at all the events, they were canceling events before the events were being banned. For example, LibertyCon, which is a big libertarian convention I was planning to go to in DC, canceled before there were any mandates from the government to cancel them. We had what do you call it? South by Southwest was canceled, is way far out. It's not even it hasn't even come close to the date it usually happens. Um, Coachella was delayed. Like all these places were already doing this, where they were practicing this, social isolation, which I even think is unnecessary unless you know for a fact you've been in an area where there's been high exposure, or you yourself or someone close to you is infected. That's like the only way. And I would say that people who are really at risk, because from what I've seen currently, the people who are at risk are people who are over the age of 65 and people who are immune deficient, which already practice this social isolation when it comes to sickness all the time. The people over the age of 65 aren't usually out and about anyways, and people who are immune deficient are extremely careful already. It would just be a warning to say, hey, stay home if you, have these immune deficiencies. Now, the exact behavior is not entirely known, essentially how it's acting. And from the rate of exposure that we're seeing and the rate of death, who is dying because of it, it's almost identical to the flu, except for the flu kills more kids than coronavirus had.
Oh, okay.
Because kids, yeah.
Can I narrow it down just a little bit? And what I heard from you is that the government's response is unnecessary because people were already doing it. Is that the extent of your argument, or is there more to it?
There is a little more to it, because if it was just people were already doing it, then it wouldn't be a problem. What the problem comes from it is it overextends the hand to a point where now restaurants are completely limited, at least in the state of New York, limited to deliveries only. A lot of restaurants don't have the infrastructure set up, especially small business ones, for delivery in the first place. They'll have to negotiate with like a Grubhub app to, get that delivery resources. And then also, there's always the problem that comes with the government and the state, is that it's non-voluntary, and the response is you can be jailed, you can have violent force threatened against you, you can have things taken away from you.
Okay.
And this is a dangerous precedent to set.
Okay, I see your point now. So what you're saying is that because of this, there could potentially be more harm than good, at least in some aspects. Skylar, what do you think about that? I mean, in response to the argument that it's unnecessary or authoritarian, do you think that do you think the government should be doing what they're doing, or no?
Well, so I'm not really familiar with the mandations that the government has set as to, what people should and should not be doing. I always thought so far I thought it was a recommendation. It's recommended that you don't go to a gathering of more than 50 people.
So I don't think that there are many federal rules right now that apply to us. I mean, some of it will apply to trade and to borders, but I think a lot of it comes down to state rules.
Yeah, it's mostly state and local communities who are doing this. The federal government released a set of guidelines that they technically can't enforce on the states, but a lot of states are agreeing to. And these guidelines include things like banning events that are more than like 50 people, shutting down restaurants, shutting down schools.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's a federal thing while also not being a federal thing. because your state doesn't have to follow it. But from what I've heard, most states that are currently affected, New York is one of the most affected, are following these guidelines. New York is shot up to 1,000 cases, even though it's had the most like authoritarian crackdown of any state.
Okay, so the last thing that I
real quick, sorry. For context, there's only 5,000 cases in the entire U.S. So
Oh, okay.
a fifth belong to New York.
All right. Well,
Yeah, but we also have the largest population in the states, right? Besides California, because we have New York City.
Yeah, but California is like actually essentially very lower. So it's definitely not a population correlation thing.
Okay. The last thing I kind of want to touch on this topic for in regards to if the government's response is authoritarian or not before we move on to something else that I want to talk about. I think that the response is unconstitutional just from a legal perspective. I don't think that the government can constitutionally ban gatherings of people because in the First Amendment it guarantees the right to assembly, period, not the right to assembly when the government says it's okay to do that. Thoughts? Am I totally wrong here?
I agree. I mean, I tend not to cite the Constitution because, I mean, I'm not always the biggest fan of the Constitution.
Says the one who carries a mini Constitution around.
Yeah. Well, I don't carry it as often as I used to, but I like when I do cite the Constitution, it's usually the Bill of Rights like that. And technically, yes, from a legal perspective, this is illegal to ban gatherings of any size, really.
Okay. So one of the other things that I wanted to get into is this. I'll put the link in the chat so that you guys can glance at it if you want to. Basically, there was this Facebook group of first responders who supported Donald Trump, and a lot of them are saying that either the virus is a hoax or the virus all this hysteria is unwarranted and the media is just trying to make Trump look really bad about it. I thought it was kind of funny just reading through it. I want to kind of hear your guys' thoughts on this a little bit.
I can let our guest go first unless he wants me to go first.
No, I'll let you go first.
Okay, yeah. I have some thoughts on this because I've heard a lot of theories on the origins of the coronavirus. And honestly, I gotta be honest. I don't really believe any of them, because I don't think there's even extensive evidence for any of them, other than it just crossed from animals to humans, because we've observed the coronavirus in animals for years, decades, I'm pretty sure. And we know it's a thing that exists. Plenty of things have crossed over before. I mean, the AIDS pandemic in the 80s, that was because it crossed over from apes to humans. Well, I should say specifically, I think it was chimps. So it's completely possible that this is just a natural thing, and I think that's most likely what happened.
Okay.
And I think the government's response, while I think it's overhyped and mostly a product of hysteria, this wasn't a created thing. I can't really believe that this was a created thing. I think it's a matter of convenience that they're using it as a cover. There's several things they're using it as a cover as. First, to implement more authoritarian policies under the guise of public safety. And second, to hide the coming financial crisis that was brewing for, I would say, years before this. To kind of mask that and blame it on something else other than what the actual cause is, which is Federal Reserve policy and government policy.
All right, all right. Skylar, what do you think? Is it all a hoax? Is the media just doing this to make Trump look bad? Is there no coronavirus at all? It doesn't exist? What do you think?
Well, I think that's kind of a silly premise. I have heard those conspiracy theories, and I think they're pretty delightful. I mean, I work. Obviously, I'm a first responder. I work with responders, and a lot of people have a pretty blasé attitude about it. You know, they're just like, it's just whatever. Don't worry. Don't cough on me. It's not that big of a deal. I think it's clearly an actual virus. We have like evidence to contest to that. It's an obvious ailment that people are getting, and it's most likely an animal vector, and it's being transmitted person to person through saliva droplets or whatever. So that's pretty plain to see. I think that it's just kind of a knee-jerk reaction for people to be like, "Oh, that can't be real. That can't be something that just happens, right? It's got to be something else. Too convenient to be at this time."
It's got to be the government just taking our guns.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Just like shit happens, man. The Spanish flu, H1N1, fucking SARS, all that stuff. It just happened, and it's a bad time, but it doesn't necessarily mean anything. That's my opinion of it. Whether or not it's some kind of governmental ploy to try and wage biological warfare on the Chinese to steal their money back or something. It could be, but I don't think.
All right.
Okay. I actually just thought of an article real quick that I saw. It's related to this. And take it with a grain of salt, because we know it comes out of China, and we know China was faking numbers to try to pretend that it was not as big of a deal in China, and that they were handling it better than they were putting off. And a lot of people now are like, oh, we should do exactly what China did. China is a great example of what to do, when in reality, I think they've had the most deaths from the virus. I mean,
didn't one of their makeshift hospitals collapse?
Yeah, no, it was a terrible response. And some people are falsely claiming that they're ahead on getting the vaccine, and there's a lot of misinformation going on that people are buying from the Chinese government that's putting out. But this one's an interesting one because it is from an academic source in China, and one that's not affiliated with the government. But it said that it's entirely possible that we've been overcounting how many corona cases there have, and that the tests that have been being used, because we were short on tests, and a lot of the tests were not coming from private institutions, because the FDA and other regulatory bureaucracies in other countries were denying makeshift tests. But the current tests have a lot of false positives, so the number could be immensely inflated.
Oh, okay. I thought, if anything, we'd have more cases than were being reported, just by the nature of people not getting tested.
There's evidence that we have more cases than reported, in the sense that a lot of people just stay home and don't get tested for this, because it has very similar symptoms to flu.
Yep.
And to most people, it's going to just seem like they contracted the flu. So there is that. But this evidence is examining actual test kits and finding that they're coming up with a lot of false positives.
Oh, all right. I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, this study I think just came out today. I just happened to see it.
Well, that's good to know. There may be false positives. That's great. With all this mass hysteria going around, and now you can't even trust the test that tells you whether or not you got it. Very nice. Skylar, something I wanted to ask you about. In your experience as an EMT, what kind of capabilities do we have with our healthcare system when it comes to combating a pandemic like this? Is there good reason for this social distancing and banning of gatherings, or do you think we could possibly handle an increased number of cases?
No. So far, the strain that it's put in, so just in my area, we have
Mm-hmm.
4 hospitals. The strain that it's put on our hospitals so far and our uh, 911 system in general, not only the ambulance service, but the police and the fire services as well, is beyond anything that we're capable of handling. We're kind of scrambling to figure out the best way to approach it, especially because we're talking about how the state's instituting these mandations. Those are new. Those are like within the past couple days.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
we already had a confirmed case here like at least a week ago, and we didn't do anything about it. I had a crew. I'm working in dispatch right now, but I had a crew who came into contact with a person who was supposed to be in quarantine on Friday, and they didn't know anything about it because there's supposed to be a premises warning on their house so that we'd know to tell them that, hey, this person could possibly have coronavirus. And we were none the wiser, and we sent them in, and they were exposed. That person ended up dying that day, and the 2 crew members ended up getting. We didn't know anything about it. We didn't put anything like any system in place to try and defend ourselves. So 2 days after that, until like last night. So we're always a little late and a dollar short on like what I've been seeing on how we should be handling this. But so far, even though they're late, I think that the actions are appropriate. We're seeing more use of PPE. We're seeing more awareness how it's being and all that. So,
Excuse me, Skylar. Skylar, just one moment. Peyton,
sure.
could you stop breathing on your microphone, Peyton?
Oh, sorry, my bad.
I I was having a little trouble hearing some of the things you were saying, and I was thinking to myself, what is that? So, you're saying that we need to. What do you think we need to do so that our healthcare system is better prepared for either this pandemic or another similar outbreak?
well, for this one, I think we kind of screwed the pooch because we're a little late on it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that probably half of the people that I work with, if not more, have come into contact with somebody who is probably COVID positive at this point. So that kind of sucks, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just based on our late response to it, we didn't take it seriously until people were dying, and then people we were working with started showing symptoms. And now we're like, oh shit, now everybody needs to wear a gown and goggles and N95, and they're setting up triage outside of hospitals now. We're not taking riders. Fire department won't respond to certain calls unless they're cardiac arrests, and they can respond to those at their discretion. The police are staging for us now. Absolutely crazy. I never thought I'd see the day. So it's
Mm-hmm.
basically just the best way to have prepared for it was just to take it more seriously from the beginning.
What
To,
what do you think
but
would happen to our healthcare system if people just resume their lives as normal? If people did not stay home, or people had large gatherings, people went out to eat?
we would see, we would see a lot more cases, and we'd see a lot more fatalities
Mm-hmm.
because, a lot more people are immunocompromised than we would guess. Some people go most of their life without even realizing it. And then it also affects people who have respiratory disorders. So your COPDers, your asthmatics,
Yep.
people with pulmonary disorders, cystic fibrosis, anything like that.
A little bit of a personal question, real quick, right here. I used to have asthma. I don't anymore. Am I at higher risk?
I don't know. Presumably, I would assume so.
Aw,
But
damn.
I believe it's any respiratory or immune deficiency, so asthma would fall into that.
Damn.
But I think you're not as risk as somebody who has an immune deficiency. I think respiratory um, deficiency is it's most likely just going to be that you're like bedridden longer.
Well, it's you develop pneumonia, and it's viral pneumonia, and depending on how your body handles that, is basically what ends up killing you. So normally, why people die is because they'll contract the infection, and then they'll develop pneumonia symptoms, and then that'll end up causing them to go into multi-system organ failure, kill you, right? Or you'll just, you'll become hypoxic and die, or any slew of other reasons to do with your respiratory system. It's my understanding. Like I said, I'm not an expert. It's just
Okay.
Oh yeah, I don't claim to be an expert either. I mean, there's a lot I don't know about it either, but this is just what I've seen from reading about it, because I decided best to read what the WHO, CDC, other academic sources on this are saying about it before I freak out and panic like most people have.
Oh yeah, speaking of panic, what about all these people buying toilet paper? I mean, come on, that's like the least important thing that you could be thinking about right now.
Well, they're thinking they're going to quarantine.
So with regards to this, they picked possibly the worst resource to hoard, because toilet paper and groceries in general, honestly, first of all, most groceries you don't need to stock up on. You need to have food for at least 2 weeks stocked up, and then maybe like 1 case of toilet paper. If you have a really big family who goes through toilet paper pretty often, 2 or 3.
Or if you eat a lot of beans.
The problem is
the
here,
beans.
people don't know what the correct resource is to stock up on when there's a situation like this. Because the first things to go are not these kind of resources. They're advanced goods. So you're going to see a decline in anything that comes overseas. If it's made overseas, you're probably going to see a shortage in it. If the country of origin is somewhere that's heavily affected, where they have major trade restrictions and stuff. So like, if you have stuff that's made in China or Europe right now, stock up on that stuff if you're going to need more of it, because you're not going to get it for a while. Advanced goods are the first thing to go, and that should be the first thing you think to stock up on, as well as like a basic supply of food. I suggest that at all times you should always, even if there's not a pandemic going on, because you never know what's going to happen, is have at least 2 weeks supply of food, mostly canned food, non-perishables. So,
yep.
And
I'm stocking up on all of my
water.
essentials. I'm stocking up on Netflix
that's about all you
and Amazon. Gotta have my Netflix. Gotta have YouTube Red. I'm stocking up on all that. I gotta be prepared for this, and I feel prepared now that I have my case of Charmin Ultra Strong. It's got the bear. It'll keep me comfortable. And I got my Netflix. I think I'm going to be okay. I think I'm going to be able to ride this one out. Just maybe. If nobody else has anything like super pressing, the last thing that I just wanted to do, just end this episode on a fun note instead of a scare the shit out of everyone note, we're all going to die, is just talk about some of the fun in quotation marks conspiracies about this, which will of course probably get this episode taken off YouTube and Spotify and literally everywhere else. But I think conspiracies are fun.
I agree. I think we should make our own conspiracy.
All right, that's a great idea. Let's make our own conspiracy. First of all, go ahead, Skylar. What do you think?
No, it's your show. You go.
I didn't even know what I was going to say. I was going to make it up as I was going, so go ahead, man.
Me too.
I think that the coronavirus was created in a lab in Canada, okay? And then a Chinese spy stole it from Canada. And then what they're going to do is they're going to use this to create this economic panic, right? And all these people are going to go out of business. And even banks are going to go out of business as people start taking money out of it. And it's going to be another thing, just like the Great Depression, where the big banks consolidate lots of littler banks so that there's less competition. And that's all this is a cash grab. And then of course they're going to come out with the vaccine because they've had it all along. And the vaccine's going to cost us, $3,000 each or something like that. That's my conspiracy. What about you guys?
I believe that actually the virus is not real, and every death has just been someone killed by the New World Order. And
Oh, okay. All right.
that, yeah,
So the Men in Black, basically?
essentially.
All right. Okay. Skylar, what do you think?
Oh, I have two branches that I want to go down, but I don't know which one to take.
Well, why don't you take the two branches and merge them together? They're one and the same.
Okay. All right. So I think that the virus came from a super sophisticated millipede people who live underground in the forests of China. And I think that they developed it as a way to take back the land which is theirs. However, I also realize that I am a schizophrenic and that cannot be real, and that none of you can be real, and that I am alone making up my own situation, probably from within inside an asylum.
This is your podcast. I mean, of course. Of course.
Yes.
That's the only...
Only one.
Of course you had to come up with that scenario. Man, I'm terrified of centipedes and millipedes. Now I'm going to be scared shitless of coronavirus. I thought we were going to have a fun ending, nobody's going to die, and now I'm terrified. The millipedes are coming for us.
All right.
Yeah, that was all I had. Peyton, do you have anything else? I don't even really want to do a closing statement. I don't think so.
Honestly, I don't really have anything, especially since I haven't read into depth a lot of the conspiracy theories around the virus, other than like it was made in the lab, in which I found like zero evidence that it was made in the lab.
Yeah. Yep. Well, anyway, I can't say that I can speak intelligently about this coronavirus. I can basically speak about it as much as anyone else can because it just develops day by day. But Skylar, I would like to offer you the final closing statement, though. Just anything that you would like to say about it, based on your experience as an EMT.
Oh, sure. Wash your hands. Don't kiss your grandma on the mouth.
No, who shouldn't be kissing our grandma on the mouth anyway, Skylar? I mean, come on.
Yeah, that's what if you really love your grandma?
Well, I do, but not in that way.
What, does she have COPD?
I don't know. Is that... No, I don't think so.
Okay, well then you should be all set then.
Okay. All right. I'll tell her.
Okay.
All right, so, yeah, everybody, just like Skylar said, stay safe. The soap, I read something about it, doesn't just wash the virus off like an emulsifying agent would, but it actually tears apart the virus, kind of like that thing that the Greeks used to do where they would take the horses and attach people's limbs to it. Yeah, it basically does that to the virus. So, yeah, wash your hands with soap and water. That's about it for today's episode. A little bit of a shorter episode, hopefully a lot more fun. I didn't want it to be, all death and gloom and despair like everything else is nowadays. And that's about it. So thank you for tuning in, and have a great life. Don't die. Stay safe. Don't kiss your grandma on the mouth. Wise words of Skylar.